All right, welcome to our third and final Zoom meeting on the inner game of music. We are looking at the last third of the book, applying inner game concepts to ensemble and individual learning, chapter 7 through 10. So, as in previous meetings, we'll discuss a little bit about each chapter, and then we got some questions for reflection. So I'll start off with chapter 7, The Power of Thinking. Thinking plays a major role in musical performance, but overthinking can be detrimental. Green explains how structured, intentional thinking enhances practice, while excessive analysis during performance creates anxiety. He distinguishes between the role of thinking in preparation and the need to let go while playing. This chapter offers techniques for effective mental practice, including visualization and positive self talk. Reed encourages musicians to cultivate a mindset where thinking serves their music rather than hinders it. By using thought as a tool rather than a source of self doubt, performers can optimize their mental approach to music. So, question: how might the inner game principles change the dynamics within an ensemble, and how could this affect group performance? Ready, set, go.
I'm mostly listening to this to get ideas for teaching private students, honestly, and not so much in a large ensemble. I think that students generally feel a lot safer and less exposed in a large ensemble. And so, unless you're playing a solo within said group, like I know he did give that example. Actually, I'm going to retract my statement and we can just erase that part of the video.
Yeah.
I did like the part where he said, like, trying to distract somebody and giving them like a hairdryer or whatever to try to distract somebody while they're playing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think kids' ensemble rehearsals are generally chaotic enough that they get some of that regularly anyways.
Mm-hmm. There's always so many other parts going on.
Yep.
Percussionists.
Yep. I've lost count of how many slips of paper I get to get kids to one thing or another in the middle. So there's always something coming in. So
I remember in college something that my trumpet teacher had me do, and it's right along these lines. I was in grad school, and we were talking a lot about analysis produces paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working on my graduate recital, and what he had me do was read a book while I was practicing. So I had a system where I'd work through the Clark book and the Arbin book every morning, and it took about an hour and a half to 2 hours. But while I was doing that, it's just patterns, so I had it memorized. I was reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So I think I read it probably 6 times in a couple of semesters. But I would just read it, have the paperback book there open while I was running through Clark 2. In all 12 keys and multiple octaves. And then later on in lessons, I would have to play a passage from one of my solos while reading a magazine article. And then I would have to summarize for him what I just read. Assuming, of course, that I played the passage correctly. So that was all about the distraction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't realize what he was doing at the time, but when I read this part of the book, that's what it made me think of. But again, that's in private lessons.
Yeah, I've been having my my students after once again the 6th graders as they're going through that accent on achievement book. once if they've memorized something, like going back to the super early ones, I'm having them stand up and like spin in circles as they play it. You know, trombones get to point at the ceiling and spin. Um, it
Yeah.
just helps really just their memorization skills. It comes across a lot better if you give them something else to do versus just saying turn your music stand around and play it. Um,
Sure.
just that little bit of relying a little bit more on instinct than thought, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know how like your kids feel when it's like festival season and they have to go perform for an adjudicator. I feel like my kids always freak out. And this year, it was like a month ago, we had our D3 large group festival, and I actually took the time to be like, okay, let's calm our mind, let's relax, let's take our time, let's go out there, and like as soon as we get onto the stage, let's still take our time, and then go into the performance. And I think that helped a lot, and that like looking through this chapter, that kind of reminded me of that moment of just like simplifying your thoughts and just you know being in the moment, I guess. So.
So thinking about the the overall principles of the book, how that can improve unity within the ensemble and just make kids more aware that they're part of a group rather than just thinking as individuals. It's harder when they're beginners because everyone's the same part.
Yeah.
As they get into more advanced literature in later on middle school and in high school, when you have a piece of music that's got 6 things going on at the same time, it's a little more difficult to conceptualize how you are part of the group when you're doing your own thing. So I think that's something the book can help us apply that. Any other thoughts on that chapter? We don't have to take a full hour to do this. We're just chatting. So
yeah. No, I finished listening to the book about a week and a half ago, so I'm a little fuzzy on what was in what chapter.
I know. And the last chapter, if you're listening to it, is just example after example after example.
Yeah.
So
And I stopped at the meditation because I normally listen to it while I'm driving, and that doesn't seem like a good
pretty quick.
idea.
Yeah. Like, let's listen to 6 hours of forest sounds. Great idea. Okay, let's see. Chapter 8, The Power of Imagination. Imagination fuels creativity and expression in music. It highlights how great musicians use vivid mental imagery to shape their interpretations, whether by visualizing a story behind a piece or mentally hearing the music before playing. And there's a whole bunch of exercises in the chapter to imagine different textures, colors, and emotions while you're performing. And he encourages musicians to go beyond the technical aspects of music and tap into their creative intuition. By engaging the imagination, performers can bring more depth and originality to their playing. I think that goes along more with advanced players and soloists. How do you bring your own interpretation to the Tchaikovsky violin concerto versus the way that Midori did it? She's okay.
Well, I don't know. Even some of the beginning band stuff, thinking of all the really, because the only recordings, like good level recordings, are what's on like J.W. Pepper when you're listening to those examples there. So they're all kind of like they're decent recordings, but they're all kind of vanilla and baseline. So especially thinking of some of the like crazy titles that they come up with for these little beginning pieces. They're fun titles, and so I think there's a little bit more opportunity in there to get them started thinking about it early. Especially with just simple dynamic contrasts.
I didn't care for all the imagining stuff. Like, oh, think about this word in the song and then play it like you're really thinking about that word. And then think about this next word and then play it like, I'm like that. I didn't care for that part.
A little ooey gooey.
It was.
Yeah.
And I don't have that much time. So,
Yeah. Well, I like. So Brian Balmage's for beginning band, he has like a 3-part Midnight series.
Yeah.
He wrote the Midnight Mission, Midnight Sky, Midnight Madness, and he has a little story that goes along with each one. And because they're all based around his kids when they were very young. So like doing those stories with them, and I have not had better beginning band staccatos than with that one moment. So I think, like, once again, I think it's just you have to, each piece is a lot bigger picture than what Galway is talking about in the book when you're doing these younger musicians. But I think it also gives them a chance to kind of have a little bit more fun with it too. But it's a bigger story than just individual words.
Agreed.
It kind of reminded me, we did a project one time about synesthesia, where people, see a word and it's associated with a color. Tuesday is blue, and there's nothing you can do to change that for these people. It's just something with the way people's brains and the chemistry, how their wiring works or not. But people with synesthesia sometimes can be incredibly creative musicians. I know there was a thing, I think it was with the Chicago Symphony. This lady was a cellist, and they had her play in front of the orchestra, and they had a thing hooked up on her head, and they put basically what her brain was doing up on a screen above the orchestra, and you could see, because she had synesthesia, so when she would play her cello, certain key centers would evoke certain colors, and so when she played a certain part of the thing, all the colors on the screen were yellow, and then they would turn red when there was a shift in the tonality. So that's kind of what it made me think of, was the more esoteric thing. Again, finding a specific word to go with a specific part of music that I don't teach choir, so it didn't ring quite as true.
I'm glad you don't teach choir. I'd have to divorce you.
Yeah, that would be a rough sell for me.
We could all stand around and give back rubs.
Yeah, I remember doing that in college.
I got in trouble for that comment once. Yeah, because some kids were giving each other back rubs in the back of the class. I said, "Hey guys, this isn't choir. Go sit down."
And you got in trouble?
A little bit, yeah. The choir teacher got a little peeved at me. I know.
Is that Mackenzie?
No. That was Melody. That was like her first year with us, I think.
Yeah.
But anyways, it was just one of those things, like, off the cuff comment. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh,
accurate.
Yeah. No, Mackenzie would. She'd love that. She'd find it funny. But anyways.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I approve.
Okay, let's see. How can you encourage students to find joy in their music making, even amid challenges or mistakes? That's our question for discussion here. How can they find joy even when they're having challenges or mistakes?
That one's the hardest one, because I think that's what kids are most concerned about, is making mistakes and being judged by their peers and by themselves, honestly, too. So I'm always playing along with my kids, and I don't hide the fact that I constantly make mistakes. Like I squeak, I scratch, I play on the wrong string, and I try to normalize mistakes because nobody plays perfectly.
Yeah.
So that's what I do, but it doesn't apply any of the techniques in this book.
So there was one thing, I don't know if it was in this chapter or other chapters, but he talks about essentially like teaching other instruments and like being better at teaching other instruments than his primary because he's going
Bass
through
and
the
cello.
process. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, for the mistakes thing, that's why I always play trumpets along with my kids because I am terrible at it. And that's just like it gives me the chance to make mistakes, to have those flubs a little bit more naturally, and to just kind of go with it and get them to be okay. And the other side of that is finding a way for those students who are overly goofy with their mistakes. Well, once again, it's a very I don't know if it's much of the high school, but the middle school mistake of going to make a mistake and then be flippant and a punk about it is quite obnoxious.
Yeah,
So,
by the time they're in high school, they know if they do that, everyone around them's going to thump them.
yeah.
So that goes away pretty quick.
Hmm.
But middle school kids, that's what they live for.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we have 2 of each at home right now. 4 teenagers right now.
That's okay.
We'll survive.
Okay. I'm hiding in my car, but it's okay.
I'm hiding at school. They're all at symphony practice.
Yeah, they are.
So, Josh, what do you think?
I don't know, I'm thinking. I'm just kind of looking through the book, like going, like reading chapter 7 kind of applies to this with letting go, and like going back to simplifying your thoughts and everything. We were at our California trip. We went to Cal State Long Beach with my band, and we got a clinic with the professor there, and we were playing O Magnum Mysterium,
Yep.
and difficult piece, and my kids for the longest time, they're like, this is boring, it's whole notes, half notes, and it's difficult, like they know it's difficult, and so like I think that's their defense mechanism of like, this is boring, like I don't like this, because they're playing it technically poorly, right? And so like we were going along in the clinic, and I don't remember what the professor said, but like there was just a shift that happened all of a sudden, after he made a couple tweaks and like one of the biggest like impact points of the piece. And right after the clinic, my kids were like, it was such a simple thought. Now I really like this piece. Like, it's such a fun piece. I'm like, what? Come on.
You probably said something similar 40 times in rehearsal.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He's from further out of town, so he's got more expertise.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's because, I approach things in a very technical manner. And so I'm always like technique and talking about this, that, and like the release and like, the attack. And he didn't talk about any of that when he was talking to my band. And going back to like that, the talking emotion and things like that, I think that's the route that he took. And just hearing the difference, like they did let go. They completely let go, and it was like this magical moment. I got goosebumps, and like he stopped, and all the kids were like, they were just in awe. Either that, or they were really tired from our 10-hour bus ride. But but it was a cool moment, and just kind of like thinking about this, I think they enjoyed the music much more when it was simplified in that way. So
Yeah, it makes it more accessible.
yeah,
It's a tough piece. I've done that quite a number of times. Have you sung it in choir?
No, I haven't. I've
you wrote it.
listened to a lot of recordings.
Yeah, we did it when I was in college. It's
Yeah,
pretty powerful stuff.
it is. Yeah.
I think it's available for strings also. Let's see. Next chapter is 9. The power of experience. Experience is one of the best teachers in music. Green discusses how repeated exposure to performing, practicing, and experimenting builds confidence and skill over time. He advises musicians to seek a variety of musical experiences to expand their abilities. Chapter emphasizes the importance of learning from each performance rather than judging it harshly. Green encourages musicians to reflect on their experiences constructively, using them as stepping stones for growth. Over time, accumulated experience leads to a deeper connection with music and a stronger sense of artistic identity. So that is something that I think is extremely important. A lot of times I'll record a piece or a passage from a piece and then play it right back to everybody. And I always ask, the first thing I said is what went well? What did you do well? And then I'll ask, what did you do individually well? What can you improve on individually? What did the group do well? What can the group improve on? So I always try and start it with a positive so that they're going about it that way. I also really like how he talks about getting as much variety as you can. It's important for their development. They need to play Bach. They need to play Beethoven. They also need to play John Williams and Michael Giacchino and Henry Mancini and Mozart. You know, they need all of the styles. They should know what it is like to play a piece of music that's, you know, a genre that they're not used to. So what are your thoughts on that?
It seems like everything is something they're not used to. I had to get in my guitar class. I had, I'm going through them. I had 2 kids actually who didn't know who the Beatles were, like little things like that, and the only reason they knew "Immigrant Song" by Led Zeppelin is because it's in Thor Ragnarok. It's 30 seconds of it, and so it's that pop culture piece, that connection point is frayed. So it's like, you give them something and it doesn't, unless it's Baby Shark or something. Well, even that's too old.
Or the theme to Bluey.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So.
I think that is not really addressed very well in this book, because the book is from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, and the attention span of people born in that era is a bit longer than kids born since, say, 2010. They've been raised by video screens, and I mean, it's scientifically proven their attention span is so much shorter now. And with Instagram and all the other, streaming media services, it's really tough. If you tell a kid that, the concert's going to be an hour, they freak out. They're like, oh my God, an hour? How are we supposed to sit that long? Like, have you ever been to a movie? What are you talking about? This is live entertainment. So, yeah, finding ways to remain relevant is really tough. I mean, we're doing music from Wicked right now with all my groups, and it's really good music. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have quite the same musical depth as, say, variations on a Korean folk song, which we did on our last concert. And some of them get that. I think it's still important for you to play absolutely as well as you can on every single piece. You can still find challenges in all of it.
Well, and a lot of more modern music has more complex rhythms, which is completely valid for teaching. Like pop music has crazy hard rhythms.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not much harmonic depth, but
Well,
lots of good rhythm stuff.
3 chords, right? What's wrong with that? Taylor Swift uses the same 3 chords, and she sold more.
Okay, stop. She does not talk about what you know. She's a good
Taylor Swift
composer.
on our Christmas concert.
Okay, that song was hot garbage, but it was a Christmas song.
But my flute players bought it and paid for it, so I'm like, okay, we'll play it.
That's awesome.
Christmas Tree Farm. Modern
I
classic.
never even heard it before.
Either. I wouldn't know her if I saw her walking down the street.
I think you would recognize somebody important was walking down the street.
Yeah, I wouldn't know who she is though. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot in that chapter to unpack, really. And then the final chapter, he talks about how to apply the integrating principles to teaching. I think that's mostly to teaching one-on-one. How educators can help students overcome self-doubt and develop inner trust. Traditional teaching methods often focus on external corrections, but he suggests a more supportive approach that fosters self-awareness and confidence. So that, I think, brought into the 21st century is still highly applicable. He was well ahead of his time when he wrote this, because a lot of people did not get it. When you have the folks that were trained in the 50s and 60s reading this book going, this will never work. You can't let kids talk in rehearsal. What do you mean? No.
It'd be nice if they talked a little less.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they talked a little less. He provides strategies for guiding students to discover their own solutions through mindful listening and self-observation. And he discusses the role of encouragement and constructive feedback in helping musicians grow. And he concludes with a vision for a more intuitive and empowering way of teaching music. So I know, all of us went through teacher training programs and university ensembles and all of that. And that's where most of us have learned how to run rehearsals. But I think this book, it helps me from one standpoint, just to reflect on my own upbringing and what worked for me and what didn't. And then how I can help apply that to the, kids that are in my classes now. Because we all stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. And, trying to encourage them to keep going and keep growing as a musician. It's a good reminder for me, at least. So our final discussion question: what steps could you take to encourage a lifelong growth mindset for students, not just as musicians, but in other aspects of life? That's a big question.
No kidding. Good grief.
What is the answer to life and all of its?
That's basically what they're asking.
Kidding.
Should GPT come up with that question?
Mindset. What steps could you take to encourage a lifelong growth mindset for students, not just as musicians, but in other aspects of life? That reminds me of like the philosophy of music education that we all had to write it.
Oh gosh.
The best one I ever heard is 4 words: teach kids through music.
That's a good one.
That's kind of what this is. You using what we do as a medium We're just instructing children on how to be better people, but do it while you have a clarinet in your hands. You can reach people on a deeper and a different level as a musician than you can as a football player or a architect or a plumber. I mean, that's pretty intimate, but
I think just approaching music in the most positive mindset, and showing kids how to improve and pointing out when they've improved, and having them self-reflect. Like, those are all skills that translate really easily into life, into any other into their jobs, into their relationships and things like that.
I've been telling my sixth graders, I don't know, talk about social media, some reel I was watching. It was this comedy actor, and he said one of his teachers told him, you don't yell at a bud for not being a flower yet.
nice.
Just giving kids kind of that little bit longer view of, like, you just got that, B flat on the trombone. Cool, nice. We hit that, you're still here. We're working on opening up. So, just it's a little thing like that, just keeping it, because they're so immediate attention minded. Just
Why
keeping.
can't I play the bells of Scotland already?
Yeah.
I want to play my B flat major scale.
Mhm.
Why can't I just go and play the Carnival of Venice?
Yeah. So, giving them that view, and has been, I don't know if it's been helpful. A lot of them look at me like, what are you saying, type thing, because I had to explain what a bud was.
Well,
These
yeah.
little things like, okay, step back.
Terminology.
Yeah. But yeah, so just that little bit. And also, one of the things I love about the gathering of the bands thing at NIC is still, seeing all the old people up on stage with the NIC band. Uh, that, and then I liked when Terry used to point out, like, the number of doctors or whoever else was up on stage. I hope that David Blink does a little bit of that at future ones. But just, once again, just giving them that more long-term view, I guess.
Yeah, that's a big part of what we do too. Not just building for the future, but also honoring the legacy. We're continuing this tradition that's been going for hundreds of years, and we're just here for this part of it. What's it going to be like in 50 years when all of us are gone? Are people still going to be playing Beethoven? Probably. Are they still going to be listening to Taylor Swift? She sold a lot of records.
I think your answer was different about, was it 11 years ago now? I remember you gave that same example, but your answer was a quick no.
Well, some artists have staying power, like Beatles, like I think Beatles are crap, but a lot of people love them. So
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's like one of those, like, regardless of whether you like the group or not, it's like they're,
it has cultural significance.
yeah.
It's cultural significance and
Mhm.
in the moment. But 200 years ago, Mozart was pop music. Opera was what people did on a hot date Friday night.
Mhm.
To go clubbing, they'd go to the opera.
You want to go to the opera this week, Jim?
It's notes of Figaro. But yeah, I mean, it's all, how do we connect
Mhm.
and encourage them to continue exploring and not just listen to pop music. There's nothing wrong with that, and some people do pretty well in that genre.
Yeah.
If it gets them practicing, I'm all for it. I had a kid show up. Actually, there were two different kids today, which was odd. One had printed out something from The Lord of the Rings
Mhm.
in a key that was not friendly for strings, but that's okay. But they're going to learn it because they're interested in playing it, and ultimately that's a win. And then another one it was a pop song. I can't remember what it was. It was in 4 flats, which is like the worst key ever for a first-year string player. But
That's
it's
not even-
easy to take A flat and make it into A, so I showed her how to do that. And again, like, it gets her practicing, so hooray for pop music.
Well, the thing you do with the summer strings where you have different songs that they can go learn, and one of them every year is a pop song, or every
I
week.
just like playing, fun stuff. Like we do Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle Twinkle and all these folk songs, which are fine, but
But Happy
That
with Earl Williams is also fine.
that doesn't make them excited.
Right. Movie music is a lot of fun. I always do my final concert every year. I always do music from movies and films and Broadway stuff. So
Yeah, I can give my middle schoolers much harder things if it's from a movie.
oh
Like,
yeah,
you know, How to Train
They'll
Your
work on
Dragon.
it.
Like for
Give 'em
middle
John
school kids
Powell.
doing some of that stuff is not easy for them. You know, but they'll work
Everybody-
at it because.
for Harry Potter stuff. Yeah, the Hedwig's theme, that's like grade 5. It is so stinking hard.
Yeah.
They just want to play the melody because it's like, oh, it's really cool. I'm like, yeah, dude, you don't even know how hard this is. They want to play it. So more power to you. Okay. So as far as the class and the credit goes, like I said in the email, send me a 1-page, no more than 1 page, reflection on your thoughts about this book and how you can apply it.
Single or double spaced?
Just 1 page.
Don't care. Okay.
Give me 1 page.
8-point font.
6-point fonts. You know, no.
That was 16.
Yes.
With a crayon.
Make all your decimal. You make all your periods like 1 point font bigger.
$50 bill and send it to me. And then it just takes me. I just got to look at them and make sure you did them, and then I'll upload the grades into the thing, and it from my end it's pretty easy, and then you got your credit. So, and hopefully NNU will let us continue doing this through IMEA. This is the 3rd time I've done it, and it just wasn't advertised very well this time. It's a real easy credit. I mean, 3 meetings, and and anytime you go to Allstate, you can do the thing through them too. The credit through there, it's really easy. Just same thing, write a 1-page reflection or whatever it needs to be. Okay, get that to me by the 14th, next Monday or sooner, and then it's done. And John will get his in after he watches this on his way back from Greece.
Hi, John.
All right, well, that's all I got for you. So I hope you enjoyed the book.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thanks for doing this.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.